This is the first unofficial GTA San Andreas remake ever made. The first beta dropped in 2011, a whole 10 years before the defective edition even launched. It's called GTA 4 San Andreas, a total conversion mod for GTA 4 that brings the entire San Andreas map into the Rage engine. The last version, Beta 3, was released in 2012, and while it didn't include story missions, it was still way ahead of its time. The mod starts off perfectly. We spawn in Idlewood, Los Santos with the legendary
"Oh shit, here we go again."
From there, we're free to explore the entire map. Unlike Vice City Next Gen Edition, there are no story missions, but back then, porting missions between games seemed impossible. Today, modders know how to do it, but at the time, this was as close to a remake as we could get. The first thing that stands out is the graphics. There's no advanced graphics mod applied here. The team simply tweaked GTA 4's visuals to fit the San Andreas world, and honestly, they nailed it. Back in 2012, this looked like a true next-gen remake. Even today, it still holds up, but there's plenty of room for improvement, especially when you compare it to what Revolution Team did with Vice City, adding a custom ENB series that made the visuals a lot better. As you've probably noticed, San Andreas vehicles are present in the mod, which is a great touch, but they aren't without issues. Even while driving something as simple as the Greenwood, it's easy to see that the taillights look a bit off, and the textures could be higher quality. Another issue is the license plates, or rather, the complete lack of proper ones. In the original San Andreas, plates were dynamic, generating random 7-character numbers on every vehicle. But for some reason, GTA 4's Rage engine abandoned that system, and all plates simply read Liberty City. The mod authors used empty San Andreas plates in vehicles. But because of GTA 4's limitations, all cars now drive around with completely blank plates, or these saying San Andreas. It's not a huge problem, but it's definitely noticeable. Another limitation of the GTA 4 engine is the lack of planes. In Vice City Next Gen Edition, this issue was worked around by replacing planes with helicopters in missions that originally used them. And honestly, it wasn't that noticeable since Vice City's map is relatively small. But here, it's a much bigger issue. Planes technically exist here, but they don't seem to work properly. They spawn in the world, but they lack sounds and don't function as they should, making them feel unfinished. San Andreas is massive compared to Vice City. To put it into perspective, Vice City's map covers approximately 3.5 square miles, while San Andreas spans about 13.9, making it nearly 4 times larger. Not having planes makes traveling between cities feel way slower, and while using something like a Hydra would have been the perfect solution, well, it is what it is. When we arrive at Grove Street, we're immediately attacked by the Ballas, even though we didn't provoke them at all. Fighting back turns into a mini gang war shootout, which is honestly a pretty cool feature. Since GTA 4 didn't have gang territories like San Andreas, the modders had to create this system from scratch, which is pretty impressive. CJ's house is fully enterable straight from the street, and they even kept the floating save disc icon just like in the original game. The interior looks great overall, but it's missing the wardrobe, likely because in San Andreas, the wardrobe wasn't actually part of CJ's house model. Instead, it was a separate interior that loaded when stepping into a yellow marker. Right next to CJ's house, there's a BMX, and this is where things get interesting. Since GTA 4 doesn't have bicycles, the modders had to get creative, so they replaced the Faggio with a BMX. The result is both hilarious and cursed. CJ doesn't pedal at all, and the bike still makes Faggio engine sounds when moving. It almost feels like an electric BMX, but considering this is set in the 90s, that wouldn't make much sense. Another thing worth mentioning, all radio stations are included, along with their classic radio icons. I can't show them here because of copyright, but you'll have to take my word for it. They're all there, just like in the original game. And as you've probably already noticed, the mod also includes the classic San Andreas HUD, which is almost fully functional. Time, money, health, armor, and of course, the minimap radar all work exactly as they should. To be fully functional though, it would still need the statistics list with respect, stamina, muscle, and the rest of the original San Andreas attributes. But even without that, it captures the classic feel really well. And while we're on the topic of muscles, as soon as the game starts, CJ is already bulked up. There's a simple reason for that. The gyms don't work in this mod. This is yet another feature that Rockstar abandoned when transitioning from the 3D to the HD era. Neither GTA 4 nor 5 5 have functional gyms, and players can't change their character's physique anymore. There's a good chance GTA 6 might bring it back, but that's a topic for another video. As I mentioned earlier, this project doesn't include missions from San Andreas, which is completely understandable, but there was definitely room for more activities to make the world feel more alive. Unfortunately, that's where the mod falls a bit short. The gang wars I talked about earlier are in the game, but they feel pretty limited and sometimes buggy. From what I've seen, they only take place around Grove Street, so it was probably just a preview of a bigger feature that the authors may have planned to expand later. Another activity the mod offers is street races, which sounds exciting until you actually try them. After the countdown starts, none of the AI opponents move. The cars just sit there, so instead of a proper competitive race, it ends up being more of a checkpoint challenge where you just drive through the course alone. After one attempt, there's really no reason to come back to it since it just doesn't work as intended. At this point, it might seem like this project doesn't offer much beyond a simple map port with working traffic, and maybe it's not really worth playing. But before jumping to that conclusion, there's one huge feature that was added in Beta 3, multiplayer. Yes, you heard that right. This 2012 mod had fully functional multiplayer. It only worked on patch 1070, but even with that limitation, it was still an incredible thing. Multiplayer completely changed the experience, making the mod way more meaningful. We could roleplay, set up death matches, organize street races, or just mess around with other players. It gave so much more purpose to the game, even without story missions or other single-player activities. Surprisingly, it looks like this multiplayer still works today. I came across a YouTube video uploaded just a few months ago showing people actually playing deathmatch on it. At this point, I plan to improve the game with some graphics mods, but that turned out to be nearly impossible on Beta 3. This version seems to be incompatible with such mods, causing the launcher to completely stop working, or if the game somehow launched, the game kept freezing after a few seconds. But there's also another must-have mod, a vehicle pack by Zolika. He released it a few years ago, and honestly, it's a game changer for this mod. He noticed how inconsistent the car models are, and how it feels like each one was converted by a different person, with some looking okay and others completely awful. Zolika's pack fixes that issue by converting every San Andreas vehicle to GTA 4's engine with the same level of quality. Everything now looks much more authentic to the original San Andreas style, while also taking advantage of newer modding techniques. The pack includes fully working breakable glass, dirt maps just like in San Andreas, and even tuning features that work with Zolika's trainer. Planes have been adjusted for proper taxiing, meaning they don't spin out like crazy when turning, and cop cars now spawn properly based on the region, so you'll see LSPD in Los Santos, SFPD in San Fierro, and LVPD in Las Venturas. And while there are still some unconverted cars appearing in traffic, it's a massive improvement over the original mod. But I wasn't ready to give up with the graphics improvements just yet. After some digging, I found out that Beta 2 handles additional mods way better, so I decided to give it a try. Getting it to work wasn't easy though. Official links for Beta 2 no longer work, so I had to track it down elsewhere. And even after installing it, the game kept crashing while loading. And now a huge shout out to robertesaum for helping me figure it out. It turns out I just had too much leftover junk in my game folder, and after cleaning it up, Beta 2 launched perfectly. The time cycle is slightly different compared to Beta 3, but that's fine because now I could finally install the graphics mod I wanted, CryEnB version 3. Luckily, it runs perfectly on Beta 2, and San Andreas looks so much better. The lighting, shadows, and overall visuals feel way fresher, making the entire game look more modern. But I'm not gonna lie, it's not exactly next-gen graphics. And honestly, I'd say the defective edition actually looks a bit better, especially with the fog and atmosphere improvements added in recent updates. But even with that, I still think this looks better than vanilla San Andreas. And since this is Beta 2, that means we can finally install the Snow Edition, which was only released for this version. For me, this is a huge throwback to 2009, when I was messing around with the old Snow Andreas mod for the original San Andreas. With Snow Edition installed, the entire map is covered in snow, and while the textures are pretty low quality, it somehow fits the game's overall atmosphere. The snowy streets give San Andreas a completely different vibe, making it feel like an alternate winter version of the game we never got. Driving on icy roads is also an interesting experience. Some cars slide all over the place like they're still on summer tires, while others handle surprisingly well. It's a bit random, but it makes driving way more unpredictable, especially at higher speeds. It might not be perfect, but as a bonus feature for Beta 2, it's a really fun addition to mess around with. Overall, installing the mod is pretty straightforward, as long as you have some basic knowledge of modding GTA 4. The most important step is downgrading your game, preferably to version 1070. Once that's done, everything else is smooth sailing. The mod comes with an auto installer and a launcher, folder, which you'll use to apply the hotfix patch. Replaying this mod after all these years really hit me with nostalgia for the early 2010s. That was a time when the GTA modding scene was thriving, with some of the best mods ever created dropping during that era. Mods like GTA 3 Rage, Ghostown Paradise, tons of superhero mods, and many others pushed the limits of what was possible in GTA games. It truly felt like the golden age of modding. And the best part? Back then, Rockstar actually supported the modding community. They even promoted fan-made mods on their newswire and acknowledged the work of modders. And this was the era when this project was born. At the time, it was revolutionary, and to be honest, it still holds up today. What's even more surprising is that the project's official website is still online. Usually, I'd expect it to be taken down after a year or two, especially since development stopped a long time ago. It's hard to say why the team left the mod in a beta state. Maybe they lost motivation, or maybe it was because of the upcoming release of GTA 5 at the time. We'll probably never know the real reason. And in contrast to the Revolution team, which consisted of 3 people, a surprisingly large team worked on this project. Bringing together so many people for a fan-made mod is no easy task, especially for a community-driven project. After the huge success of Vice City Next Gen Edition, I started wondering, is there a chance that modders, now with better tools and more experience, might take on similar remakes of GTA 3 and San Andreas? And of course, I'm talking about the key missing piece that only Vice City Next Gen Edition managed to include: fully playable story missions. Imagine if modders actually got together to finish this project. I can already picture how it could turn out. The perfect inspiration would be the fan-made renders by Welcome to the 80s. If you haven't seen his work, he created an absolutely mind-blowing animation of San Andreas, reimagined with modern graphics, realistic lighting, and insane detail. It's exactly what a real remake should look like. And as much as I'd love to see that happen, realistically, the chances are pretty low. A mod like that would almost immediately get taken down by Take-Two, and the creators would be at risk of legal action. The only tiny chance of it ever happening is if a group of passionate fans decided to take on the challenge, spend hundreds of hours recreating these games, and then release the mod anonymously through something like torrents. Of course, I'm not encouraging anything, just letting myself daydream about how incredible that would be. So, what do you think? Does this mod feel like a true remake of San Andreas, even though it was released over 13 years ago? And have you ever tried it out before, or is this your first time hearing about it? Let me know in the comments down below.